Hi, this is SAT Practice Test 1, Writing and Language, questions 34 to 44. As usual, it's not necessarily needed to read the entire passage while you do these questions, especially since this set of questions is in the later part of the practice test. Depending on the timing, you might not actually get time to really read the passage as thoroughly as you want with these. So in general, I'll definitely read the passage and go through it because that's definitely a best practice and something you should do if you have time. But I'll try and add in some notes about how if you're rushing towards the end of the test, you can still make sure to get some answers done on the page that would make sense and have a high likelihood of being correct. So let's start with question 34, but first let's just read the passage. So long viewed by many as the stereotypical useless major, philosophy is now being seen by many students and prospective employers as in fact a very useful and practical major, offering students a host of transferable skills with relevance to the modern workplace. That's the first sentence, right? Just saying people used to think philosophy was a useless major. Turns out now it's pretty useful and prospective employers like it. The next sentence is, in broad terms, philosophy is the study of meaning and the values underlying thought and behavior. And if we look at question 34, it's asking about this in broad terms and asking if it's a good description. So in broad terms is actually pretty good. The definition that's given after is very abstract and it makes a lot of sense, right? We say philosophy is useful. Now we need to tell the users what philosophy is. But let's look at the other options just in case. For example, isn't quite correct, right? We're not giving an instance of how it's useful in the workplace. We're just telling you what it is. I guess you could draw some conclusions, but that's not necessarily up to the reader. In contrast isn't quite correct because we're not drawing a contrast here. We're just describing what philosophy is. And the same thing with nevertheless. So let's go with option A. Question 35 asks about the next sentence. Let's keep reading. But more pragmatically, the discipline encourages students to analyze complex material, question conventional beliefs, and express thoughts in a concise manner. And it's asking about this more pragmatically. So this is actually correct. More pragmatically is serving as an adverb here. So it's describing what the description does, what the discipline does for students. So that's actually pretty good. But let's look at the options. So speaking in a more pragmatic way, speaking in a way more pragmatically, and in a more pragmatic speaking way, all three of these options are grammatically correct. They provide far more like verboseness and also this like idea of introducing a speaker, which isn't quite necessary here, right? We're just saying more pragmatically, it encourages students to analyze material well and write well and all these different useful things. So A is actually a great option here. Question 36 asks about the next sentence, which says, because philosophy teaching students not what to think but how to think, the age-old discipline offers consistently useful tools for academic and professional achievement. Right? So here, teaching is the verb that is in question, and we're asking mainly about the tense, right? So if you look at these options. So with a question like this, you want to try and figure out what tense it should be in and what if it should be singular or plural, and then match it accordingly. So because philosophy blank students, not what to think, but how to think. So philosophy is teaching students, right? If it was is teaching, it would be correct. But we need something that's in the present tense and singular. So philosophy teaches works. Philosophy to teach doesn't work because that's an infinitive verb form. So it needs to be something like because philosophy has to teach, right? We need another verb there to supplement it, and we don't have another verb there. And teaching doesn't make sense because we're not actually including several verbs here with just philosophy teaches. So let's go with B. Question 37 asks about which choice most effectively sets up the information that follows. So that means that we need to read the sentence before and the sentence after, and then try and figure out where it fits in the context. So let's look. Because philosophy teaches students not what to think, but how to think, the age-old discipline offers consistently useful tools for academic and professional achievement. So that sentence is just saying that philosophy teaches students how to think, and it's great. The next one says, a 1994 survey concluded that only 18% of American colleges required at least one philosophy course. Therefore, between 92 and 96, more than 400 independent philosophy departments were eliminated from institutions. So we want something that's kind of bridging that gap between saying that philosophy is useful and whether or not universities support it. So let's look at the options, right? And just to note, it is saying that universities do not seem to be supporting it. Only 18% of them require students to take a course in the subject material. So let's look at the options again. So consequently, philosophy students have been receiving an increasing number of job offers. We're considering universities, right? We're considering only 18% of colleges. Great. Therefore, because of the evidence, colleges increase their offerings in philosophy. Now we're saying we're losing offerings. Notwithstanding the attractiveness of this course of studies, students have resisted majoring in philosophy. We're not talking about students, we're talking about universities. So no. And the last one is, however, despite its many utilitarian beliefs, colleges have always supported the study of, have not always, supported the study of philosophy. And this one's correct, right? We're saying colleges in the past, in 92 and 96, were removing their departments. Great. Question 38 is asking about this word therefore here. So the one before it says only 18% of American colleges required one course, and then between 92 and 96, they eliminated all these departments. So we want something that's not like a cause and effect, right? Because these happened at the same time. 92 and 96 were the years in which 94 happened. So it's not like the survey came out and then everyone was like, oh, gotta remove my departments. It all happened at once. So we want something that's saying like simultaneously or it makes sense that, etc. So therefore and thus are not ideal options because they suggest cause and effect, which isn't quite the case. However is also not a good option because it suggests a contrast. So moreover is our option. If we look at this one closely, if you were rushing and weren't sure and had to go through these options, right? With a question like 37, it can be really hard because you need to actually understand the passage and what's going on. But with this one, you can categorize these quickly. So therefore and thus are pretty much the same in a lot of their meanings. So they're probably not going to be the case, right? If you have two options, you can only pick one on the exam. So it's probably not going to be either, if that makes sense. And however is a contrast. And if you just look quickly, you see that there's no contrast. That makes C the case. Next, let's do question 39. Question 39 asks about the sentence down here and asks which choice most effectively combines the sentences at the underlined portion. So if you were running out of time and just needed to get something down on the page, this is a good question to say because honestly, reading all of this is probably not relevant to just combining two sentences. You should read it if you have the time, but if you're rushing, which you might be when you're towards the end of the set of questions, it's nothing wrong with just like looking directly at it because this is a purely grammatical question. And that's a nice thing to keep track of for when you're running out of time. However, let's read the passage. So more recently, colleges have recognized the practicality and increasing popularity of studying philosophy and have markedly increased the number of philosophy programs offered. By 2008, there were 817 programs, up from 765 a decade before. In addition, the number of four-year graduates in philosophy has grown from 46% in a decade. Also, studies have found that those students who major in philosophy often do better than students from other majors in both verbal reasoning and analytical writing. These results can be measured by standardized test scores. On the graduate record examination, for example, students intending to study philosophy in grad school has scored higher than students in all but four other majors. All right, so let's look back at the question 39 sentence, which is combining these two. Right, so we have studies have found that students who major in philosophy often do better than students from other majors in both verbal and analytical writing. These results can be measured by the standardized test scores, just to repeat it. So in general with this, if I were rushing, I would go, okay, A is the most concise, and let's take a quick look. Analytical writing as measured by standardized test scores, right? Here, you're just adding that as a prepositional phrase describing how you are measuring this reasoning and analytical writing. That makes grammatical sense. It combines the two sentences. It's the most concise one. It's like measurably shorter than the rest. Go with it. So that would work, and we can just confirm it because we have a little bit more time today. So writing, comma, and these results can be measured by standardized test scores is grammatically correct, but it's not nearly as concise as the one before it. In general, you want to go with a concise option. C, writing, comma, which can also be, again, is a little verbose, as is writing when the results are. This one also has the problem of suggesting that it's only better when you use standardized test scores to measure it, and as the writer is trying to suggest that philosophy is a great major in general, suggesting that it's only better in terms of standardized test scores, which is only one way to measure academic, verbal reasoning, and analytical writing, it could be admitting a weakness. So we wouldn't want to go with that one as well. So let's go with A. Question 40 asks about the next sentence, where it is, on the graduate record examination, the GRE, for example, students intending to study philosophy in grad school has scored higher than students in all but four other majors. So here, students is plural, has scored is a singular verb, right? So like he or she has scored higher on the exam. So that if this was a student intending to study philosophy in grad school has scored higher than another student in another major, this would be correct. But because it's plural, we need the plural form of the same construct. So we could do have scored, right? That's still in the past tense. We want to maintain that tense. That part is correct, right? Because we're talking about the past exam scores, not the current or future exam scores, right? And it's plural. Have is a plural noun. Plural verb. So let's go with that one. Question 41 is asking about the next sentence, which says, these days, many students majoring in philosophy have no intention of becoming philosophers. And it's asking about this sentence noun phrase here, students majoring. So if we look at the one in the sentence, it has an apostrophe there for the students. That one isn't actually necessary. The reason for that is because the students aren't being possessive here. It's not the students' majors. It's the students who are majoring. Majoring is acting as an adjective here, describing the students. So let's look at our options, right? We don't want that possessive form. So we don't want this one, because that also suggests the students' majors in philosophy have no intentions of becoming philosophers, which isn't correct, right? The majors aren't the ones who don't want to be philosophers, it's the students. Does this many students major in philosophy have no intention? Again, we're not talking about the major itself, and also here we would actually need the possessive if we were describing the major of the students. So that one is also not the case. B is actually the one that works, right? Because it's plural, there's no apostrophe. Students who are majoring in philosophy, which is implied by this construct right here, have no intention of becoming philosophers. Perfect. Question 42 asks about adding a following sentence. So we actually do need to read this through in order to get that idea. In general, though, if you are rushing again, you can just look at this really quickly, see that it's not really relevant, that we're talking here about philosophy as a major, and this is the ancient Greek philosopher Plato. So you might just want to go with one that says it's off topic. But again, we want to read the passage because we have time to. Right? In general, if you have the extra time, you should definitely use it and try and answer the questions as thoroughly as possible. Those strategies only really come up when you don't have the time to do that. So anyway, law and business specifically benefit from the complicated theoretical issues raised in the study of philosophy. But philosophy can be just as useful as engineering or any other field requiring complex analytical skills. Then the sentence following, what they want to add would be that these skills are transferable across professions, which makes them beneficial to 21st century students. And it's asking what the sentence, the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, for example, wrote many of his works in the form of dialogues. So this isn't really relevant at all to anything that we're considering here, right? We're talking about how it's just like engineering or law or business, not how Plato wrote his things in dialogues. We're not even talking about current philosophers. We're saying students don't want to be philosophers. So we should definitely go with no. But let's look at the two options for no. So the first one says no because it blurs the paragraph's focus, which is correct. It definitely does. And D says no because it undermines the passage's claim about the employability of philosophy majors. And technically, we're not talking about being a philosopher in the first place. And Plato was kind of employed, like he wrote works, so that's not relevant either. So let's go to option C. Question 43 is asking, just scroll up a little, about the word which here, that these skills are transferable across professions, which makes them especially beneficial to 21st century students. Here, the subject of the sentence is that, right? That these skills are transferable across professions. So the concept is kind of what we're describing here, makes them especially beneficial to 21st century students. So we actually don't want the word which here because it's repetitive of the word that and creates a run-on sentence where we have two different constructs in the same place. So we actually just want to remove that. So let's go with delete. And the last one is, once again, because we have time, let's read it through. Because today's students can expect to hold multiple jobs, some of which may not even exist yet during our lifetime, studying philosophy allows them to be flexible and adaptable. High demand, advanced exam scores, and varied professional skills all argue for maintaining and enhancing philosophy courses and majors within academic institutions. So this is actually just asking about the word our up here, right? Again, if you don't have a ton of exposition or a ton of words when in a question, it's something you can usually answer quickly without actually reading most of the background information. So the word our here is possessive, but if we look at the sentence, right, we're describing today's students, so that's not necessarily contained within the reader. Like we might be today's students, but the person writing this may not be. We don't know. So we want something that sticks directly to the students. So students is a plural noun, right? So one's or his or her would not work, but their would. In general, with this passage, a couple of main takeaways from it is that oftentimes you don't need to read the passage all the way through to get the material you need, and there are some strategies that you can use to decide which ones you can answer most correctly without doing too much deep reading. So something like questions 43 or 44, where it's literally just look at this word, is it a good word? Might be good ones, they might be bad ones, you have to look at it a little more closely sometimes. But in general, if you have time to read the passage, you should not waste your time, you should read it. Thank you.